What we're talking about today is telepathy, how to really navigate it and use it consciously, okay? Because here's the thing, it's a lot more common than we think, okay? It happens between humans a lot. And I would dare to say that because of the consciousness of this planet, even though there's a lot more light available now than there were like 10 years ago or 20 years ago, even though we have this ascension going on, we are still experiencing a human experience through our human energy fields. And because of that, we are also operating a lot of times through our mental awareness, our mental fields, our mind, our brain, our thought fields. This is what then allows us to actually have this mental telepathy and this energetic telepathy, mostly through mental and thought energy fields and those frequency pathways, if that makes sense. There are also other ways that telepathy can happen. In a maybe more undesirable way, it can happen through cords, energetic cords or energetic tubes that some beings may create. And it can also be unconscious. This can also be from past, it can even be from a past life, honestly, or a quantum life, some other level of our existence. So that is something that can definitely happen where we have a cord that is either feeding or giving or taking mental frequencies. That's another way that telepathy can happen. But then there's also higher levels of telepathy. So this is when we're talking about the higher mental fields. We're talking about celestial and other crystalline higher etheric fields that bring us a higher frequency intelligence, and it's bringing us this energy that is a different wavelength. Again, it's a different wavelength, a different frequency than our lower human thoughts and emotions, if that makes sense. And again, lower does not invalidate it or make it like a bad thing, but we're simply talking about egoic constructs when we're talking about lower levels, lower frequencies. And even in lower frequencies, we can speak about things that bring us down to density versus higher frequencies, which is always going to be an alchemizing force, which is transmuting those lower frequencies. And it's also going to be something that is uplifting and it's expansive and it's expressive. More about that in some other conversation. I have talked about that actually plenty of times, but we have to understand it in a more objective, neutral, scientific perspective, if that makes sense, because otherwise we're going to get into like these emotional biases, if that makes sense. We're going to think about it as a judgment or a personal attack or something like that, when it's really just alchemy. Telepathy in its higher form, getting back to the topic, back on track, telepathy in its higher form is when beings, higher beings, communicate with us, our star family, star beings. And as I say that, I feel just my body is getting really like vibing it, because like, yeah, star beings always here, and it's something that lights me up. That is why my channel is called Starseed Soul Fractals, why I speak about star beings, why I made an entire course on starseed origins, because this is something that lights me up. It's something that is deeply well, not programmed into my soul, because my soul cannot be programmed, but it's brought through my soul frequencies onto this realm. And this is my way of contributing to ascension, contributing into just the evolutionary cycles of humans and into the new phase of our planet and our species. And so that's just one example. Star beings can communicate with us telepathically, different divinities, different deities, different forms of a spiritual higher dimensional consciousness, even stars, because stellar consciousness is also a thing. It's going to be really a big deal for our, especially for star seeds. Stellar consciousness, just the consciousness of the star, one star or multiple stars, for a lot of us, multiple stars. It's going to be quite a part of our evolution. So especially, I mean, for humans, divine humanity, the sun of the solar system, always very important, very vibrant force field of energy for us to communicate to. So really, any being, no matter what their frequency is, no matter what their energy is sort of made of, if that makes sense, can communicate us telepathically. There's just these different sort of sections, if that makes sense. So there's the section of the the source love that mostly speaks through our hearts. And there's these other frequencies, so angelic and deity star being sort of frequency bandwidth that also connects through the heart, but they can also speak through the higher aspects of our mind, so that they can sort of pour their frequency through, and that is the way they speak telepathically. Hard word to say. And then there is the lower space where we have humans and other entities and beings that communicate through these, again, these lower frequencies. They communicate through density and yes, different thoughts. There's a lot of this lower frequency. It can come through chords, but there's also another way that it can happen between humans. And I have a prime example of this. I have very real examples of this actually. When I was still living with my parents, I moved there for a few years temporarily. Now I live on my own again, which is doing wonders for just my life in general. I was there with my parents for a few years, so between like 2018 and 2021. Actually, my brother now owns that house, so now it's my brother's house. We were living there, and our rooms were right next to each other. And when our rooms are next to someone else's room, that is where there's a much higher chance to, exchange energies with them, especially if it's like small rooms. So even in a situation, if you live in a small flat and then there's another room right next to it, I sometimes feel my fucking neighbors. Okay, no judgment. Like I go through stuff, but I just have to like clear their energies out of here sometimes. So when it comes to that, there's a couple of times when I was just thinking about like a certain food. Like I had a food in mind. I was just like, this would be really delicious food today. Then just a little, I didn't say anything. I was just thinking. It was just in me. The frequency of the food that I want was in me. And then just a few moments after, my brother would just come in and just like, hey, you want this food? I was like, yeah, I want some food. And then another time I remember I was just talking to something, I was just texting someone because they were having like some Asian food. I don't remember what it was, but I was just like, damn, texting back at them, like, damn, like Asian would be someone. Then my brother comes in and he's just like, hey, you want some like Chinese? Just like, okay, I'm all up for Chinese. So that would happen a few times there. And then there's like other situations where I had like telepathy with for example, my ex. This was somewhat abusive person. But of course we were talking a lot. That's another, if you're exchanging a lot of energy with someone, that can also create, either cords or energetic tubes or, whatever I was talking about before. And when your energy fields are very close together, see, that's the thing, because my energy field was constantly, well, a lot of times very close to my brother's energy field. So therefore, that would happen a lot. There was a lot of energy exchange. And then we spent quite a bit of time in the same space by very close proximity. And in another video, I will go into energetic vampirism. So you will hear maybe more about the darker side of this, where some beings may use that to their advantage. Like when they're very close proximity, they might sort of start leeching. But the thing about telepathy, this happened with my ex as well, and as well as my mom, it has happened a lot. And like my situation with my mother, it has its ups and downs, and I don't really want to go too much into that, but there's also been these situations where we may have been thinking about one another and then one of us texts the other. So that will sometimes happen. But there's also some some weirder situations where this happens, like because there's also another aspect where it's maybe not telepathy. Okay. That's when we go to those higher frequencies. Okay. Because sometimes we might share guides in the guidance realms, and that's when they may be giving the same message to different people. And so, or maybe even our higher selves are working together, and that can happen. So therefore, if you're getting the same message, or if you're seeing somebody speak about something in the same way or in a similar way that you are, they might be also receiving the same message either from their higher levels or even the source itself, because like deep down we're all one. So it's this is where it gets really complicated, because sometimes we just happen to get the same information, and that's where it's more about that higher aspect of telepathy. Because again, there is one way of communicating with guides, which is through the clairs. When you go into that meditation and you engage with your clairs, you might be seeing things, you might be hearing things, you might be feeling things. But then there's other ways where it does feel much more like a thought comes up in your head. And it will often have its own voice. It will not sound like your voice. And that's, if you recognize the voice, then of course that might be a cue, whether or not it's actual telepathy with your guides, or if it's more like a communication, telepathic communication with uh, some other being. Okay, so that's the cue. But if it sounds like yours, if a sort of a thought sounds like your internal dialogue, that is most likely either an aspect of your consciousness or it's an imitation of your consciousness, or a projection. Projection is a tricky thing, because that is where it's definitely not true most of the time. Most of the time, it's an illusion, but it's something that somebody is sort of throwing into your field. Either it's an aspect of their own, or it's something that they think you have. It's something that they think you are, and they're sort of putting it into your energy field. Most of the time, it comes from insecurities. First of all, their own ego, their own roots, all kinds of things. There's many ways that people project energies, but this definitely just feels something that's outside of you. And discerning telepathy and making sure that your sort of the telepathic frequencies that you're receiving, clearing is very important. Spiritual sanitization is very important. It's important to make sure your energy field and your space is clear. The density is being purged and cleared and removed from your place consistently. That you're calling in the divine frequencies and higher vibrational frequencies into your space regularly, that you're blessing your space, that you're protecting it. Okay. So, and again, not protecting out of fear, and also remembering your sovereignty, because these are not things to be afraid of, because they can most of the time be corrected and fixed. They can most of the time be solved. And just saying that something is a problem without understanding that it's completely okay to make mistakes, and that mistakes do happen when we practice and when we go out and play and have fun with this, things do happen. And I can say things have happened for me as well. I've had all kinds of weird experiences. And that is the wealth of, exploration and experimentation and experience. If you do want to make telepathic contact, say with extraterrestrials, I wouldn't say there's a right or wrong way, but just remember what I just said, to make sure that there isn't any dense frequencies, or like too many dense frequencies, that you're keeping yourself healthy, because that way you're going to have much more fulfilling experiences in that. And also remember to have like good intentions. Check your intentions before you go into this. Just look at, why you want to do that, and what answers you're wanting to get. What are you wishing to gain from it? Because that way you will make sure that also the quality of that experience, the quality of the telepathic connection is, going to be pure and pristine in its frequency. think of your questions beforehand. And then, because then when you go into that communication, these questions will be answered most clearly. So one thing that's important to remember when you're practicing telepathy is to not do it without people's consent, okay? Because that can actually be considered a psychic attack. So if you're trying to send thoughts to other people without them knowing that you're doing it, and I mean, okay, honestly, who am I to judge what your reason is? Because if you're doing something where it's not in the highest interest of all concerned, if you're doing this in a way where you're coming up against someone's free will, so they haven't agreed to it on any kind of a level, they haven't given you permission, don't do it, okay? Because that, again, is more of a psychic attack. And again, if you're trying to build cords to send thoughts to people, just stop it, okay? Because that is when you're, again, working from dense energies. You're not coming from the higher frequencies. And if you do want to, communicate with someone spiritually from a higher level perspective, if you want to communicate with someone's soul, you can do it through the higher heart and connecting with that person's higher self or their multidimensional self. And again, make sure that these communications are happening with the higher frequencies first, okay? So that it's not about asking people to do stuff or just trying to pull people or again control or make them do something for you, because that's going to be felt like I feel those type of things in my energy field sometimes, and it feels yeah, it feels controlling. It's not a frequency that I want to engage. Whenever you want to communicate with others in a higher dimensional way, it happens through the heart, and it happens through, especially the high heart, it happens through the frequencies of your higher self and your multidimensional self and your oversoul. So it comes from an entirely different frequency dynamic, which again, as I explained in this video, you should understand by now. Okay, so just remember consent, remember free will, remember sovereignty, and pure unconditional love in this thing as well. And with that said, I am very grateful that you have watched this video. And I would love to hear from you in the comments below. What are some of your telepathic experiences? Thank you so very much, and I will see you in the next video.